Well, guys, I just want to take a moment to say welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us for the All About the MLC. Are you getting all the royal payments you should be? My name is Cindy Cogbill. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the Programming and Community Director at Folk Alliance International. By virtual visual description, I have dark hair, a light headband, and I am in a room adorned by windows and wood. It's a little bit gloomy where I am, but our time together is going to be very, very bright. I personally love our webinar series. There's always something I take away, even if it's subject matter that I've visited before. There's always so much added. So if you've seen anything with the MLC before with us, be ready because you're going to get a few more tips. It's always an interesting time and it's always an educational time whenever we get to revisit topics. So we're so grateful for their continued partnership with the Folk Alliance and for continuing to bring great programming to all of us. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are, as we've seen, gathered together with people from all around the globe. We need to collectively recognize the importance, complexity, and difficulty of offering a land acknowledgement in a virtual space. In the context of online programming, that can sometimes be an extremely hard thing to do. But thankfully, I'm able to offer you that I am residing on the indigenous land of the Osage, Kansa, Kaw, Kickapoo, and Osheti-Sequoian nations, also known as Kansas City. We invite you not only to acknowledging our shared responsibility towards reconciliation, but to commit to taking personal, meaningful, and measurable work towards healing the legacies of colonization, forced migration, and cultural erasure. If you'd like to learn more about the indigenous lands that you're on, Scott, who's helping us on tech, will drop in the chat a link that will help you in finding out more about your space. Thank you for making that space with us. Before we get started, we'd love to do a little housekeeping. Today, like I said, is going to be a great information session. It's going to bring up tons of questions for each of us. We would love if you would use the Q&A feature instead of putting things in the chat. This allows us to make sure at the end that we can address each one in a formal and systematic way. We'll put reminders through it just because everyone gets excited about the chat, but we'll use the chat so that we can keep those links coming your way as Sirona is helping us learn about the MLC. Scott and I'll be dropping informational links in the chat along the way. But use the Q&A feature and we'll be addressing those at the end of the session. Well, without further ado, I hope that you will all help me in virtually welcome back to the FAI webinar land, Head of Educational Partnerships, Sirona Elton. Welcome, Sirona. We're excited to hear from you today.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much. It's really an honor and a privilege. So I'm so excited. So before I get started, technically, we need to have Scott take down that image that he's sharing. All right, there we go. Hi, everybody. My pleasure to be here with you. My name is Sirona Elton, the head of educational partnerships at the MLC. My pronouns are she and her. And for visual description, I have very short gray hair. And I am sitting in front of a virtual background that does look like a beautiful view out a window from an office, but it is not real. I do love this. It's one of my favorite backgrounds. So I'm so happy to be here with you today. I'm going to talk to you all about what the MLC is, what it is that we do, why we're here. And if once I've explained all that, you realize, hey, I need to take some action here because you think we might have some money for you, I'm going to explain what you need to do as well. And I do expect that there will be time for questions. So as you are watching the presentation, if questions pop into your mind, feel free to drop them into that Q&A feature there along the bottom. Please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat. That is where I'm going to be looking when it comes time for questions. I'm going to go to that Q&A list. All right, so let me go ahead now and share my screen. We do find that this can be kind of complicated, and so using some visual aids to help explain it usually does help everybody out. So let's get that screen share going, and it looks good now. So here we go. So even if you did not read a single word on this slide yet, what you can see is that the MLC is right there in the middle of a flow of money. I mean, that really kind of does, get to the heart of the matter. So the MLC is here specifically. We exist to collect and pay out a certain kind of music royalty. So we are collecting this money from what we call United States digital service providers, or DSP for short. That's what DSP stands for, that make recorded music available for interactive streaming and download. We collect money from those types of digital services in the US, and then we pay that money out to a certain category of rights holders. And specifically, this is money on the music publishing side of the business. So this money is paid generally to music publishers and publishing administrators, as well as songwriters, either who are getting paid that money by their publisher, or if they're acting as their own publisher, we pay them directly. Now, this is the whole presentation, like in a nutshell. So don't worry if a lot of that went over your head. We're going to dive deeply into each piece of this diagram to help you understand what I'm talking about. What I will also point out is that the MLC is the exclusive administrator of this in the US, which means that most of this money is flowing through us, and everybody getting paid is getting paid by us, even if they then have to pay other people. There's only one MLC, and we are officially designated by the Copyright Office to be the party that collects and pays out this particular. Okay, so let's get on to the next one. And by the way, Cindy, you're still on camera. I'm not sure if you feel like you want to be. Don't have to be, but I wanted you to know. All right, so let's keep going. So a couple of basics we want to cover off first, because it will help from a terminology point of view. So we have to make sure that everybody's crystal clear in their minds the difference between, on the one hand, a song or a composition, and on the other hand, a recording. Mechanical licensing, mechanical royalties, and it lives in the intersection of these two things. So a song or a composition, those might be words that you use. The copyright law has a word for them, and it calls them musical works. And so you'll often hear the MLC talking about works. We're talking about musical works, AKA songs or compositions. So these are created by songwriters, composers, lyricists. The business aspects of these are usually handled by music publishers. This is the publishing business, right? The copyright law defines a musical work as being made up of the music, so melody, harmony, rhythm, and lyrics, if there are any lyrics, right? That all goes into a musical work. A famous example that I'm going to use is one you've probably heard of, a song called Yesterday, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Keep that song in mind. So a copyright law protects musical works as a separate type of creative work from a sound recording, or you might just call them recordings or tracks, right? I've heard people say that. So sound recordings in the music business are typically created by recording artists with the help of producers, maybe some additional musicians, generally distributed by record companies and distributors, right? They are fundamentally the capturing of sound. And so in the music business, most of these sound recordings are sound recordings of a performance, usually in the recording studio, of a musical work. But for example, a podcast is also a sound recording. An audiobook is a sound recording as well. But those are not sound recordings of musical work, right? In the music business, most of our sound recordings are of musical work. So it's also worth pointing out that a sound recording is also separate and different from a video. So the copyright law calls videos audio visual works, and that's yet a third type of creative work protected by copyright law. And you can imagine, let's say you're watching a music video, you're actually interacting with 3 copyrights at the same time. You're watching that music video, the audio visual work, And you're hearing a sound recording, that's the second type of work, of a performance of a musical work, that's the third type of work, all nested within each other. And frankly, that's a lot of what makes this music business so complicated. So building on that song by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, that song was first recorded by the recording artist known as the Beatles, but then it was also recorded by literally, I think at this point, thousands of other artists, including Elvis Presley, Aretha Franklin, Frank Sinatra, Boys to Men, so many different artists. Maybe you have even made a recording of the song called Yesterday. So you can see how all of those recordings are separate. They're by separate recording artists, often on different record labels, that all connect back to that one song by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Okay, so I think everybody's clear on that. Another thing about terminology, we use the term mechanical license, mechanical royalties. We're going to dive more deeply into that. What exactly is at the heart of that? So a mechanical license grants permission to do two things that are part of the bundle of exclusive rights that a copyright owner is granted by the copyright law. A mechanical license grants permission to reproduce and distribute a musical work in a sound recording. And then that sound recording be available either, in physical formats or digital formats, okay? So that's what we mean when we talk about a mechanical license. Some other term you might have heard is a performance license. That actually relates back to a different right under copyright law, the right to control public performances of a work. And that's what companies like ASCAP and BMI grant. They grant performance licenses, which is different and separate from a mechanical license. Let's dive more deeply into mechanical licenses. So we're going to go sort of left to right across this screen, which is a little bit actually lines up with the chronological way this has evolved over time. So actually what I don't have, I could put on this slide even further on the left, is I could go back to something called a piano roll. Maybe you've heard of that. Way back, late 1800s, early 1900s, piano rolls and player pianos were all the rage. And for the first time, really on a widespread basis, you could listen to music without having to have a musician sitting in front of you, right? Once upon a time, the only way you could hear music was if a person was either singing or playing an instrument in the same room as you. That was it. It was the only option. Player pianos came around, and they were these pianos where you could put a device inside of them, a player piano roll, and essentially press the play button. And then the piano keys would actually move seemingly on their own, and the machine would play music. It was pretty creepy looking, actually, because it kind of looks like a ghost is playing it. So when those first were developed, the industry, the music industry reacted, and we modified our laws to cope with it. And we had the first, creation of this control over mechanical uses, reproduction and distributing of a musical work into a mechanical device, like a player piano roll, right? So we've kept the terminology from that time period. Move forward past player pianos into the real record industry. We had wax cylinders, shellac, vinyl, tape of all kinds, CDs, right? So it's long been the case that record labels, when they're going to be putting out physical records of whatever format, they have always to secure a mechanical license and then pay a mechanical royalty related to each unit that they've sold. That has not changed at all with respect to physical products. Record labels still have that same responsibility. Then we move forward into the permanent download era, right? Not a lot of permanent downloads are sold anymore, but I have a drawer of every format of iPod ever built. Sure, you may have a drawer like that too. So the way we chose to handle this in the United States when downloads first came around was that the record companies, which were already, knowledgeable about how to obtain mechanical licenses and set up to pay mechanical royalties. They added on to the mechanical licenses they were getting for physical products and also got the mechanical license for the permanent download. And then they passed the permission on to the digital download service. But the way it would work is, let's say iTunes would sell a download, iTunes would keep its share of the money, and then it would send all of the rest of the money to the record label. And then the record label would pay a mechanical royalty to the music publisher, just like they did for a physical product. And then the music publisher pays the songwriter. So that is the model we followed in the US for downloads. In many other countries, the model instead was that there was a central mechanical rights society, and those digital download services would get a mechanical license from that centralized rights society, pay the royalties to that society, and then that society would pay the publishers. That's not how we did it in the US. So record labels have that obligation on those permanent downloads to pay that mechanical license, to get the mechanical license and pay the related royalties. So that was going along for a long time. And then came some new forms of distributing music. So let's take a terminology timeout and define what an interactive stream is and what a limited download is. So an interactive stream, that terminology comes out of the copyright law. What it is, it's referring to what you might call an on-demand stream. So that's a stream where you're in charge of what you're listening to. You can go find your favorite recording on your favorite music service and press play, okay? On demand. That's what we mean when we say an interactive stream. I'm just going to contrast that with something called a non-interactive stream. Sorry, folks, you're industry insiders. You have to know that there's two different kinds of streaming. There's an interactive stream. There's also something called a non-interactive stream. Non-interactive stream is where you could pick the playlist or the channel or the station, but you cannot pick the specific recording, right? For example, if you're using like Sirius XM satellite radio, maybe you go find the station that you like, but you cannot pick the exact recording to play right now. That's called a non-interactive stream. The copyright law treats these differently. They involve different rights and different royalties, and the money flows differently from them. So you got to know that there's a difference there. An interactive stream requires a mechanical license and generates a mechanical royalty. A non-interactive stream does not, okay? Limited downloads. So maybe you're using your favorite streaming service and it has an option, a button you can press that says you want that playlist you're listening to be available for offline listening, for example, right? Maybe you're going to be up on an airplane and you're not connected to cell service at 40,000 feet in the air, and maybe you didn't choose to pay for Wi-Fi. So you're like, wait, how exactly am I streaming to my device that's not connected to anything? Well, technically, when you press that button for offline listening, what happened was all of that content, all those recordings, were downloaded to your device, but they're kind of hiding in the background. You can't go find them the way you would a permanent download file, and they're temporary. If your subscription runs out at the end of the month, you can't access them anymore. So they're limited in terms of how often you can access them, or maybe how long you can play them for, how many plays. There's limitations, but technically that's considered a download. The good news is, for rights and royalty purposes, we lump those limited downloads in with interactive stream for mechanical royalty purpose. But both of those scenarios, an interactive stream and a limited download, before those streaming services can make music available that way, there has to be a mechanical license obtained, and there is a mechanical royalty generated every time there is an interactive stream that plays, or you're playing that recording as a result of a limited download. There are mechanical royalties being generated. So I want to tell you about this diagram, but we are not going to spend a lot of time on it because it could easily take up our entire hour. It is on our website. So there is a little QR code in the top right. If, let's say, you maybe wanted to open it on your phone, what you would do is open your camera app point your camera at that QR code, and there should be a little pop-up that is a link you could click on that will then open this page in a web browser, okay? So this diagram is on our website. We also have some videos that explain it, short little animated videos, and then longer webinars. Let me tell you what this diagram is explaining, and then if you want to go check it out later, you can. By the way, our website is themlc.com, themlc.com, and under the resources section, you can visit. So what this diagram is showing is it demonstrates the flow of money, the flow of royalties when audio only music, so not video, there's nothing related to video on this diagram. And this diagram is only showing how this works in the United States, okay? We'd have to do different diagrams for each other country. So in the United States, for audio only digital uses of music, how are the royalties flowing? What is the pathway that the royalties flow down? And it's showing 4 different pathways. But the key to understanding which pathways are connected to which ways of accessing music is to look in the legend in the top right. Depending on how big your screen is, it might be quite hard to see the legend in the top right. I'll tell you what it says. It has 3 rows. And on the top row, it shows interactive streams, unlimited downloads. Those ways of consuming music create money flowing down pathway 1 and 2 and 3. So that's telling you that an interactive stream on Spotify, for example, creates 3 flows of money. 3 flows of money from that one interactive stream on Spotify. The second row of the legend says permanent downloads generate money flowing down pathway 2 and 3. And then non-interactive streams, remember like satellite radio, non-interactive streams generate money flowing down pathway 1 and 4. Okay, so pretend like the Spotify logo is at the top of this. You would draw 3 arrows from that Spotify logo down pathway 1, pathway 2, and pathway 3. Or if you put like the Sirius XM satellite radio logo at the top, you would draw an arrow from that down pathway 1 and pathway 4. That's how you use that legend. Then on the left side, pathways 1 and 2, that is money that's related to the use of the underlying song, that musical work, right? So 1 and 2, that money flows to publishers and songwriters. Pathway 3 and 4 is for the use of the sound recording. That money flows to recording artists and record labels and distributors, right? That's 3 and 4. Okay, so the pathways, pathway 1 is public performance royalty. That's money that goes to ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, Global Music Rights, and there's a new one called Alltrack. And the model those PROs pay out is generally half the money they pay to the publishers and half the money they pay to the songwriters. But if you are your own publisher, then you're getting all of that, right? So an interactive stream generates a public performance royalty. It is considered a public performance. It is also considered a reproduction and distribution, in other words, a mechanical use. So the second flow of money is the mechanical royalty. That flows from Spotify to the MLC. And then the MLC generally pays 100% of the money to the music publishers of the song. And then they pay the songwriter. However, if you are a writer who is your own music publisher, the MLC will pay you because you are the publisher. So that's the MLC money. And then that third pathway, that's the sound recording, reproduction, and distribution, right? That's going to be the money that goes to the distributor, which then pays the record label. And then the record label pays the recording artist. If you are an independent recording artist, no record label involved, right? Then your distributor's paying you directly. That's pathway number 3. And then pathway number 4, which is not involved when there's a stream on Spotify, right? Pathway number 4 is only involved in like a non-interactive stream, like on satellite radio. That would be money flowing to Sound Exchange. And then Sound Exchange generally pays about half of the money to the sound recording copyright owner, usually the label, could be the independent artist. They pay 45% of the money to that main featured artist. And then 5% of that money goes into a fund that is used to pay the background musician. So that's the way this diagram works. Take some time to go check it out on the website, and those videos you might find helpful as you're working your way through it. All right, so why is the MLC here, and why have you only read about us recently? So we are here because of a change in the US copyright law called the Music Modernization Act that was signed in 2018, bipartisan piece of legislation. The music industry all came together, 2018. One of the things that the MMA, that's what we call it for short, the MMA, one of the things that it did was it changed the way that digital mechanical licensing and royalties work. It did not change the way it works for physical. It just changed digital, and it only changed for in the United States. Okay? So the key things that this law did, which is why we are now here and this works differently, is it created something called a blanket license. So when you have a blanket license, it means that the party needing the license, like Spotify, only needs to have one license, as opposed to one from each co-owner of each song that's in each recording. That's called like individual licenses, like one at a time. A blanket license covers potentially millions of works all under one big license. So we never had this kind of approach in mechanical licensing before this change in the law. We only had the one at a time version. So it created a blanket license. It's what we call a compulsory license, which means that it's a license granted by the law, which means the copyright owner can't say yes or no. They don't even get asked. In a compulsory license, the law says if these criteria are met, the law grants a license. Okay, so we already had a mechanical compulsory license in the law with some criteria. The law expanded that criteria for a blanket compulsory license that's available to digital music services. And the only uses, though, that this license covers are digital mechanical uses, interactive streaming, limited and permanent downloads. But when you move to a blanket model, what you also need is generally a centralized organization whose responsibility it is to get everybody paid, because you're shifting that responsibility away from the party that needs the license onto somewhere. It's got to go somewhere. So the law said there has to be a mechanical licensing collective created to handle this. And that's why we're here, because the law mandated our creation. The law also said that we have to create and maintain a publicly available database of musical works ownership information so that everybody can see from every work who are the different publishers or self-administered, self-published songwriters who are collecting what share of that thing. That's required to be public. And so that's why we have it. So this law was passed in 2018, and this new way of doing things, this creation of this blanket license that became available to digital music services, that went into effect January 1st, 2021. So we've only been here a relatively few short years. So let's kind of talk about what the MLC does and doesn't do, much of which you might have already figured out from the presentation, but we find it can be helpful to be really, really clear about like what exactly is it that we do. So forgive me, I'm getting over a cough. We exist specifically to manage this new blanket compulsory mechanical license that is available to digital music services in the United States. This is talking about audio only streaming. When we use the word mechanical in the US, we are not talking about anything to do with video, okay? No visuals, it's audio only. What we do every day, we have smart computers, smart people. This is the heavy lifting that we're doing. It's something we call matching. So here's what happens. Every month, those digital services that utilize this license, they report sound recording usage to us. So they'll tell us, for example, the Beatles sound recording of yesterday was streamed this many times, and the Aretha Franklin sound recording of yesterday was streamed this many times, okay? They report that. Sometimes they also tell us that that Aretha Franklin recording of yesterday is of the song by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Sometimes they tell us that, sometimes they don't. Okay. What we have to do is match up that sound recording information to the song yesterday by John Lennon and Paul McCartney so that we can pay those mechanical royalties. The act of relating those sound recordings back to the song they are based of, that's what we call matching. So that's the heavy lift that we're doing over time. And as part of those digital services reporting that to us, they not only say this sound recording was streamed this many times, they pay us mechanical royalties, right, for all of those. And then we pass that money along. Remember the first slide, right? We're in the middle of a flow of money. We collect that money from those streaming services. And then in my example, we would pass that money on to the publishers of John Lennon and Paul McCartney's shares. And then those publishers would pay John Lennon's estate, Paul McCartney, right? So we are collecting those mechanical royalties from those digital services and paying that money out to the publisher of the song, publishers of the song. And remember, when I say publisher, I mean whoever's handling the publishing. So if you're a songwriter and you're handling your own publishing, I'm talking about you, okay? So, and we have that public database. Let me just go over a few things that we don't do, just so that there's clarity around this, right? Because it's a lot to keep track of, and I know it's confusing. So we have nothing to do with public performance royalties. Although that one stream on Spotify generates a performance royalty and a mechanical royalty, the performance royalty flows to the PROs, not to us. The mechanical royalty flows to us. But so we don't replace USCAP or BMI or any of them. What they're doing with performance royalties is separate and apart from what we are doing with mechanical royalties. We have nothing to do with digital performance royalties for sound recordings. That's what Sound Exchange does. We don't do what they do. They don't do what we do, right? We're all similar in the sense that we're collecting and distributing money, but we collect and distribute different kinds of royalties. We are not involved at all in mechanical licensing or royalties for physical products like CDs or vinyl. We're not allowed by the law. We're very, very heavily regulated. When we were created, the law has literally within the copyright law, a whole lot of language that says we must do these things and we are not allowed to do these. So we have nothing to do with mechanical licensing and royalties for physical products. We have nothing to do with video. Video does not generate a mechanical royalty. It's not covered under this blanket license. It's just nothing to do with video. So we are not collecting from TikTok or Instagram and Facebook or YouTube video. We have nothing to do with it. And we are not allowed by law to collect your digital mechanical royalties from outside of the United States. So, for example, when your music streamed on Spotify, it generates a mechanical royalty, but that is not allowed by law to flow to us. So if you've got mechanical royalties coming to you from other countries, you're going to have to explore other ways to collect that money. We are not allowed to collect that for you. We're getting close to wrapping up the slides. Just a quick note of our public database. Anybody can search it. You don't need a log on. It's just like a website. You just search, don't need to log into anything. You go to themlc.com. Up in the top right, there's a big yellow button that says public search. That's our public database. And you can go ahead and search and see what songs are in there. You can see this is one of the differences than what you can see on like the PRO website. You'll see the publisher's name, their share, and which writers they represent. You'll see all of that and which recordings have been matched to those songs. So that is available 24/7. So let's get into who should and should not become a member of the MLC. Firstly, let me just point out, it is completely free to join the MLC. There's no cost to join the MLC. And the other thing is when we collect $100, for example, we pay out $100. We don't keep any portion of it. That's because our operating costs are separately paid for by the digital music services. This is the way the law was written when we were created, and it's not true for any other organization, just us. It's very normal, for example, like if ASCAP collects $100, they use a small portion of that money to pay their operational. So does Sound Exchange, So do all of these types of organizations all over the world. That's not shady. That's the way it works. But for us, it's different. So separately from the money we collect from royalties, our operating costs are paid, which is great for you if you're entitled to this money. It means we've collected 100, we will pay out 100. And by the way, if it's delayed, it will include interest. So what do you need to do? All right, connect to collect. That's our catchphrase. That means connect with us to collect your mechanical royalties. So if you are self-published, if you are handling the publishing administration, which is another way of saying the business activity for your songs, for any of your songs that have been or will be recorded and put up on digital services, then you are the publishing administrator and you should join the MLC. Okay, again, it's free. Join the MLC, and then you're going to get your songs registered with us. If, though, all of your songs are the publishing administration is being handled by somebody else, so maybe you did a deal with a publisher and the publisher is handling the administration, or maybe you signed up with a publishing administration service like Songtrust, then Songtrust is handling the publishing administration, you will not join the MLC because we will pay the publisher or that publishing administrator who will then pay you. So it is not the case that every single songwriter needs to become a member of the MLC. You only join the MLC if you are handling the publishing administration of your songs, which means it's your responsibility to get them registered with us, with your PRO, doing all that work. If you've hired somebody else to do that, you've signed a deal with somebody else to do that, we will pay that other party on your behalf, okay? And some of you have been doing this a long time. You might have some songs that are with a publisher and other songs where you're the publisher. That's fine. And because you have some where you're acting as a publisher, you are going to sign up, but you are only going to register the songs that you are handling the publishing administration for. You would not be registering those songs that the publisher is. And I'm happy to take questions on this when we get to that stage. So if you realize now you do need to become a member, how do you become a member? TheMLC.com. Up in the top right, there's our Connect to Collect button. Click on that, and then you just sign up. You fill in a couple fields. It's short and sweet, it's not painful, and again, it's free. And then you will become a member of the MLC. And then once you're a member, though, you're not done. Like that doesn't just get you paid. Okay, that's step one. The next step is you've got to register your songs with us. You're not sending us any audio files or anything like that. You are registering your song metadata stuff, okay? And we have a variety of tools to help you do this. You can do them one at a time on the screens. We have something called our claiming tool, where perhaps you co-wrote it with somebody else, and that other person has already registered the song and added their 50% claim. You don't need to register the song from scratch. You're just going to look up that song and add your 50% claim to it. So that's what our claiming tool helps you do. If you have a lot of songs you need to register, you can use our bulk upload feature that has you set them up a very specific way using our template in a spreadsheet, and then you can upload that. So there's lots of different ways, and we have like instructional how-to videos on how to do all of these things, but you're not going to get paid until your claim, your share is on that song in our database. That's a mandate. You got to have that there or else you don't get paid. And then we also have a custom optional tool that is a really great thing for you to use. Remember how I said we have smart systems and smart people that are doing that matching work all the time, right? Matching up sound recordings to their related songs. So we also have something called a matching tool that you can use where you can search in our database for sound recordings of your songs that we have not yet been able to match. You can search, and if you find them, you can recommend a match to that we'll make. That way, nothing falls through any cracks, right? You know what recordings have been made of your songs better than we ever will. So you can use this tool to make sure that we don't miss any of them when we're doing the matching. And again, there's instructional videos on all of these tools. Just a little bit about royalties. We pay royalties on a monthly basis, which is also great if you're receiving these royalties. And there is generally a 75-day lag from the month when that activity happened on a streaming service, for example. Let's say it was streamed in January. If your song is in our database by February 10th, and then we are able to match that sound recording to your song, you would generally end up getting that on your April royalty statement. So there is a 75-day lag. This table I have to update for 2025, but it's the same 75 days, just change the date at the top of the table. And just since we started paying royalties in 2021, we have paid out more than $2 billion already, just in those few short years. So, and don't worry, if your song's not in there by February 10th, next month, we are continually trying to keep processing everything we've ever gotten that we have not been able to match and pay out. So it would just mean that it would be delayed to the following month's royalty statement. But we are constantly, we call it reprocessing everything that we have not been able to pay out. Last point on not being able to pay out, and then we'll take questions. So we have our royalties categorized into two buckets. And the key to these two different buckets is that date, January 1st, 2021. That's the date that this new way of doing things went into effect. So royalties that we have been getting from digital music services since January 2021, we refer to those royalties as blanket mechanical royalties. And we've been paying them out ever since, right? More than 2 billion. And here's the great news. You will always be able to go backwards in time and collect at least minimum 3 years of retroactive royalties. We will always, by law, we're required to always keep trying to get those royalties paid for at least 3 years. Okay, so you'll always be able to go back a minimum of 3 years. And we are allowed by law to try for longer than 3 years. And longer is better for the little guy and the little gal. So we are trying longer than 3 years. So right now, you can absolutely go all the way back to January 2021. But the other good news, actually kind of great news, is, you know, this law was changed because things were not working well, okay? And there was a lot of mechanical royalties that were not flowing to rights holders, that were sitting with those digital services. So what the law did was it said, okay, digital services, when this new way of doing things goes into effect, if you're sitting on older unpaid mechanical royalties, you can transfer all that money and data to the MLC and avoid getting sued. So they did. They transferred more than $420 million in what we call historical unmatched royalties. These are older mechanical royalties that never were paid out. And in some cases, they went all the way back to 2007. So they transferred that money to us, and we cleaned up the data, got it into our system, and started matching it and started paying it out in the summer of 2022, I believe. And we've been paying it out, summer 22, and been paying it out ever since. We have a whole section on our website under how it works. There's a whole page called Historical Unmatched with a dashboard. So you can see how much money was transferred to us, what time period it applies to, what digital services it came from, and how much of that we've been able to pay out. So what that means is that as of right now, and now is February 2025, you can still go all the way potentially to 2007 in collecting your retroactive royalty. At some point in the future, not sure when, not in the next couple months, maybe towards the end of this year or even next year, we'll be screaming from rooftops, last call, to go back beyond a certain date, not less than 3 years for certain. But at some point, we will say older than X amount, last call for that, right? And when that happens, then we don't get to keep that money. That money gets paid to all of the rights holders who got some portion of money at that time period. And if the publishers are receiving that money, they're required by law to share it with their songwriters. So check out that website page for more information. But on your royalty statement, you might see something marked as B for blanket, HU for historical unmatched. Lastly, I'm only going to be able to take a handful of questions. If you still have questions that I did not get to, don't hesitate to call us. You can call us on the phone. That's a Nashville-based phone number, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Central. You'll usually get a person on the phone in under 1 minute. You can initiate an email inquiry with us 24/7. You could send it to us. We'll get to it during business hours by going to that website address in the middle. Or if you're already a member and you're logged into our member portal, you can initiate a live chat with a human being, also Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So I'll take whatever questions I can in a second, but if I don't get to them all, and I probably won't, don't hesitate to contact us. But also look on our website, because we might have the answer on our website or on our YouTube channel. Lastly, these are our social handles. Consider following us. And now I'm going to come out of screen share and see what questions I can get through in the couple minutes we have left. Definitely on our website, there's tons of resources, frequently asked questions. There's a whole help center. And on our YouTube channel, we have short little animated videos, webinars, how-to videos, and we actually just launched a whole podcast series that you can check out as well. So we have lots and lots of resources available to you. All right, so let me come out of screen share. Then I'm going to go to the Q&A and see what we've got. Let's see what we've got. Okay. First question is, does the MLC have competitors? No, I would say we don't. We are the only officially designated organization to collect this blanket compulsory mechanical royalties in the US and pay them out. So we are a form of monopoly that is set up to work that way and approved by the law. Okay, if you don't live in the US, all right, great question, Jim. So here's your options if you live outside of the United States. So you have two choices, really. One is you could sign up with the Mechanical Rights Society in your country. For example, if you're in the UK, it's called MCPS. You could sign up with the Mechanical Rights Society in your country and authorize them to collect your mechanical royalties from all over the world. If you do that, the MLC will be paying them, and then they will pay you. Or you could decide that actually you want to sign up with that Mechanical Rights Society, but you only want them to collect from all over the world other than the US, because you want to collect from the MLC directly. You're also welcome to do that. We will happily pay you. If you're based outside of the US, it's going to be in US dollars, but no problem. We can pay you. It doesn't matter if you're based overseas, but because you are based outside of the US, you probably are going to have mechanical royalties in the country you live in. We can't get those for you. So you're going to want to look into a Mechanical Rights Society in your country, and then make sure you decide if you want them to collect from all over the world, or if you want them just to collect from outside of the US because you want to collect from the MLC directly. Okay, so already answered a question about how the MLC is funded. So who owns the Musical Works Ownership Database? So the MLC essentially owns it, except that it's mandated by law to be publicly available data. So it is available for not only anybody to search, but actually if you have enough technical skill and capability, for a very, very, very small fee, many companies have signed up to take a full download of the entire database on a regular basis. You can do that. It's going to be too big for your regular old average laptop, though. I will say it's a lot of data, but it's publicly available. So we sort of own and operate it, but we're more like a steward of that data, right? As opposed to the owner of that data from a propriety perspective. It's publicly available data, thanks to the copyright. Okay, so Bunny asks, so none of this applies if you're only recording covers, only for your original songs. That's correct, right? We're not going to pay you for a cover recording, right? So we are paying whoever is handling the publishing of the song in that recording. So if you, Bunny, recorded a cover of Yesterday by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, you're not entitled to the mechanical royalties. John Lennon and Paul McCartney are entitled to that. But what I would encourage you to do, when let's say you sign up with CD Baby and you're going to have them distribute your cover of yesterday, if there's a field there for songwriter name, don't put your name in that field because you didn't write that song. Put John Lennon and Paul McCartney in that field. That will help make sure that the mechanical royalties get routed to them. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So Paul asked, I have songs with TuneCore and CD Baby, so I don't register those with the MLC. That's the question. Okay, so here, let me explain something because people get confused about this all the time. Companies like CD Baby, TuneCore, right? In the early days of digital, the service they were offering was the distribution of sound recordings. That was it, right? They could get your sound recordings on digital service. Over time, however, they have realized a lot of the independent artists that they work with are also in need of publishing administration services. And so what they've done is they have added to the list of services that they offer, they've added publishing administration for some variation of this. You need to understand what they're offering and decide if you want it or not. If you have signed up, let's say for TuneCore Pro Publishing, you've essentially authorized them to be the publishing administrator of the song in that recording, right? Which you can only do if you wrote that song. And they will be collecting your mechanical royalties from the MLC. So it's not just because CD Baby or TuneCore is distributing your sound recording. It's the question to ask is, have you signed up with them for that added service of publishing administration, including collecting the mechanical? If you have, then we pay them and they will pay you. But if you have not, maybe you've only signed up for digital distribution, so that's all you wanted. You didn't want the publishing administration services. Then you still need to register your song with the MLC. Right? So it has to do with whether or not you have signed up for only their distribution services or also their publishing administration service. Right? You know the answer. Okay, David asked a question about the MLC being retroactive, so we answered that towards the end of the presentation. Okay, Michael asked, if I play one of my own songs on SoundCloud or another service, does the MLC pay me? So for any digital service like SoundCloud, if they are operating under the blanket mechanical license, then they have to pay the mechanical royalty to the MLC, and then the MLC pays the parties handling the publishing administration of that. So if SoundCloud has set themselves up where they're not paying you directly, and instead they're relying on that blanket mechanical, then yes, that money would flow through the MLC. So you also had asked about fraud prevention tools. So we don't get into the details at all publicly about how we are detecting and preventing fraud, but we have a lot of monitoring that we do. We have there's you can read about some examples where we've been involved in helping identify, put a stop to fraudulent behaviors. So that's really all I'm going to say about that matter. So much as to say that digital services and like the MLC and the CROs and others all are being paying very close attention to the indicators of that. We each have our own ways of detecting them. Okay, so all right, so Margot also asked about retroactive. I covered that off with historical unmatched. Okay, let's see another one. If you are a manager of multiple composers, do you have to have each composer make their own user profile, or can you create like one for everybody? So what I would do for you, I would maybe contact our support team and talk through your exact scenario. What's most likely to be the answer is that, let's say you're managing 4 different composers, right? I would create 4 different members, but you can have one login for you that gives you access to those 4 different members. A member is sort of another word for publisher. So that would be the better way to do it. In that if you're kind of doing this on their behalf, which is different than I think as the publishing administrator. But the better thing would be to call our support team, talk through your exact scenario, let them tell you what the best plan would be. Okay. Let's see. All right. When we become members living in the US, will we be tracking and playing from places around the world? No, we do not collect from outside the US. It has nothing to do with where our members live. By law, we are only collecting royalties related to digital services relying on this blanket compulsory license created by the US copyright law. And that license only applies in the US. So we are only allowed to collect for that, and we're prevented by law from collecting from outside of the US. We can pay money to people based outside the US. You know, if you're based in any other country, your music is on a US digital service, we have to pay whoever the rights holder is. So either that's you, even if you're in another country, or that's your Mechanical Rights Society, if you authorize them to collect on your behalf, or your US publisher. But we cannot collect from outside of the US and bring that money into our ecosystem. Okay. Let's see here. How long does it take to be approved and start adding works? Usually membership approval is within like 24 to 48 hours, and then you can start getting works registered. Okay, I'm going to take one last question here. And again, I'm sorry I did not get to everybody else. Please do take your questions to our support team. Okay, so this is another international question. A lot of international questions, and I've done that already. Anne asked, if we have not entered our own songs into the MLC database, will we not find our songs? Correct. The way that songs get into the MLC's database is because the party handling the publishing put them there. So if there's nobody else handling your publishing and you have never become a member of the MLC or registered them, then they're not going to be there. The only other way they'd be there is if your co-writer did register the song, claimed their share, and it's just waiting for you to come along and add your share. But for example, we don't get a data feed from BMI or anything like that, right? That's not happening. So they get into our database because the publisher has put them there. All right, so that is our last question. So sorry that I did not get to the rest, but do reach out to our support team who will be able to help answer those questions.
Let's just give a virtual round of applause to Serona Elton. The presentation was wonderful, but the Q&A, your ability to just go and go is so remarkable. Yes, thank you. And you'll just see the chat being flooded with accolades. We're so grateful for this presentation today. Again, just to reiterate, if you did not get your question answered, please call the MLC, go to the portal. They are available during business hours and they are ready to answer your questions. They've been a continued partner in the Folk Alliance. We're so absolutely grateful for them. If you are going to be in Montreal in 2 weeks with us, please stop by. We have several fireside chats with the MLC. We have the CEO, as part of our legal summit. We also have I believe the National Director of Industry Relations doing a fireside chat with Dan Navarro. The MLC is showing up in Montreal. So this is a great time to bring your questions as well if you'll be attending the 37th Annual International Folk Alliance Conference. Love that plug. Thank you, Serona, for today. Thank you to the MLC for continued partnership. And also thank you to each of you. What a lively and cooperative group. You brought such good questions and such good attention. And thank you to Scott, our team member behind the scenes, for making sure everything's taking place. Scott will be emailing out next week a recording of the session, as well as some of the vital links that were in the chat. I know a lot of you have asked for those. So keep your eyes on our YouTube channel, as well as your inboxes, because that will become available. And also, lastly, I just want to say thank you. A lot of our year-round donations are what keeps this virtual programming going. So if you are interested in helping fund these activities, we hope that you'll consider making a donation to Folk Alliance. Dan, it's great to see you in there. I just saw you pop up. Didn't give that plug because you're here, but glad you are. But that being said, great donors like Dan Navarro, who have helped us keep this online virtual programming going. So please feel free to reach out to folk.org/donate. That's a great way to help us. And we hope to see you all back in the spring for some more virtual programming, or in Montreal in 2 weeks. Stay safe, community. We are so grateful to be part of you. Thank you, everyone.